Hey gang, it's me, Dr. Steve, your Patriot Professor. And more and more people are asking the question, where's Greta? It's like she hooked up with Richard Simmons and both of them just disappeared off the planet. Or maybe she's time traveling, right? Have you seen that creepy picture of that girl in a 120-year-old photograph that looks exactly, and I mean seriously, exactly like Greta? I mean, creepy doesn't even come close to it. So maybe she's time traveling again. Oh, wait a minute. Now I know. Maybe it's because this is what happened the last time people found out where Greta was staying.
Victory! Victory! Here we go! No way we can stop it, man! That's it! That's Sri Lanka! Come on, Sri Lanka! There we go! End of the story! End of the bloody story! Bloody hell! Woohoo!
Bloody hell is right. The world took Greta's advice, particularly Sri Lanka and the European Union. They turned their backs on fossil fuels, manufactured fertilizers and the like, and now their worlds are falling apart. And as their economies crumble and they look to their secular saint for answers, alas, she's nowhere to be found. I don't think we could come close to exaggerating the cultic mania that surrounded this young Swedish climate activist. In fact, things got so insane that one parish in the Swedish church, which is itself a hopeless mess, but you actually had one parish that tweeted out that Greta was, as far as they were concerned, the successor to Christ. It literally got that insane. But we know now that it was all fabricated, If ever there were a bona fide media concocted celebrity, and no, I'm not talking about Pete Buttigieg. No, if ever there was a person who was intentionally turned into a star by the global media, it was Greta Thunberg. The Daily Caller originally broke the story back in November 2019 of what amounted to nothing less than a global media news conglomerate coming together at Columbia University's School of Journalism to collaborate on how they would cover the so-called climate crisis leading up to that year's United Nations Climate Conference. Now, according to the Daily Caller, over 250 news outlets and journalists partnered with Columbia University School of Journalism to intentionally shape and control the narrative for what they consider to be a global climate crisis. The partnership was called Covering Climate Now, and central to their coordinated messaging was inserting so-called climate news in otherwise completely unrelated stories. Some of the big names involved were CBS, Bloomberg, the Huffington Post, BuzzFeed, the Daily Beast, Newsweek, Rolling Stone, Slate, Vanity Fair. And as the Daily Caller notes, this coordinated activism intentionally fabricated a hero, a megastar, a saint to carry their message of climate alarmism to the masses. And that, of course, was none other than this 16-year-old Swedish climate activist named Greta Thunberg. You see, the whole purpose of lionizing Greta was to galvanize particularly American support for the radical policies being advocated by environmentalist activists, which of course means that we weren't looking at news. We were staring straight into the face of blatant left-wing propaganda. And it all climaxed with Greta getting Time Magazine's Person of the Year, which of course should be reworded as Liberal of the Year or Leftist Activist of the Year. This is why I would argue that it's all the epitome of fake news. Greta Thunberg is fake news. She's the embodiment of fake news, which I would stress is not necessarily her fault. She's obviously being used. A number of prominent pundits have recognized that. But what they also recognize is just how much the world has changed since Greta's infamous speech at the UN Climate Conference in 2019. You see, that same year, the nation of Sri Lanka elected a government that went full Thunberg. The government tried to impose a radical green policy on the nation, inspired by Thunberg's activism that was on full display at the World Economic Forum. They wanted to be the world's first 100% organic country. They banned any kind of chemical in their fertilizer. They implemented all kinds of green-inspired restrictions in their food production. And it didn't take long for the obvious result to become clear. Basically, their food production collapsed, and the nation descended to the brink of starvation. And what about the European Union? Well, Dutch farmers have risen up and are pushing back against what they see as the Great Reset and climate communism being forced upon them. The Dutch government has, of course, passed radically draconian measures mandating that farmers cut agricultural production by as much as 30%. This is necessary, according to their governing elite, to combat the supposedly excessive nitrogen levels that the Netherlands produces every year due to its agricultural industry, which their government, ironically, is single-handedly trying to destroy. And it's not just the Netherlands. We're seeing comparable uprisings throughout Italy and Spain and Poland, where greenflation is destroying jobs and livelihoods by the day. Moreover, energy prices throughout the continent are soaring, making it increasingly impossible for more and more people to light and heat their homes, let alone commute to work. Maybe that's why a few weeks back, the European Union actually passed a law that designated gas and nuclear power as sustainable energy resources, something that would have sent Greta into convulsions. Obviously, they were reading the tea leaves. They looked at Sri Lanka and they saw a preview of the riots that were coming if they continued to pursue this absurd green cult insanity. So now that the EU has gone and done the unthinkable, we have to ask again, where's Greta? Actually, as far as many environmental activists are concerned, they like this silence. They'd prefer her to stay hidden. Climate activists are reportedly increasingly sick of Greta and want nothing to do with her. One publication is actually calling it the de-Gretaization of the climate movement, this increasing rejection of Thunberg by climate activists. They see her shadow as growing way too big for the movement, and they rightly see that she's actually setting the movement back. Perhaps. But one thing is absolutely for certain. The Greta Thunberg doomsday cult has taken a massive hit of late. It's experiencing nothing less than, in the words of Sky News, a climate crisis of faith. The rise of Greta Thunberg will be looked back on as one of the most bizarre periods in our civilization's history, and will most assuredly be seen as one of the most ridiculous and sadly destructive liberal media creations ever concocted.
How dare you!
As always, make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button, and you'll definitely want to check out my latest video on how the documentary What is a Woman by Matt Walsh left Joe Rogan absolutely speechless. You're not going to want to miss it, so make sure to click on that link, and I will see you over there. God bless.